Alright, welcome to TriMet 101, and today we're going to be talking about buses. This should be pretty obvious, but this whole video is going to be very opinionated toward my opinions. I will tell you the pros and cons for each type of bus, how I see it, and I'll tell you what my favorite buses are in the fleet today. In case you're wondering, my favorite buses in the fleet ever were the 2100 series Gillig Phantoms, because I'd been on them before and I think they look cool. So let's start with Gillig. TriMet has a lot of Gilligs. I like their simplicity. They seem like they're lightweight and they just have the basic necessities that you'd need. The newer Gilligs, I would say anything newer than maybe the 36 or 3700s, also seem like a step up in quality, especially from the 4000s on. Definitely feel like a significant step in quality. Gillig's gotten a lot better at making buses, at least of the low floor type. Gillig made excellent Phantoms, and I think they are just now, over the last 5 years or so, perfecting the low floor and BRT model technology. I'm also a fan of the big windshield and side windows in the front. I especially like the 4300 series buses, which are part of the low floor plus series. These are nice, the nice blue interior lights, although the fact that there aren't the large windows next to the driver doors, I guess could be a sort of downside, but I still think it's probably TriMet's nicest Gilligs. And they're electric. However, my personal least favorite buses in the TriMet fleet right now are the 3000s, TriMet's oldest Gilligs. This was the time when TriMet began to routinely purchase Gillig buses and stop buying New Flyer buses. And it just so happened that TriMet got possibly the junkiest Gilligs ever. The 3000s are not the best rider experience. They're definitely louder, rattlier, and they idle much harder than the other series of buses. The one good thing that they have that the rest of the Gilligs don't have are the more comfortable seats that go a little bit higher. But that also turned out to be its big downfall because everything was built out of metal and it rattles a lot. Seriously, what is this? The New Flyer buses that came before it didn't rattle like that, so I'm not really sure what happened there. Also, the transmission in some of the older Gilligs can be quite rough. Not just the 3000s, the first few series and our 30-footers, the 3400s, can have really rough transmission. Watch this. This cannot be healthy. Third downside, the windows. The windows are the smallest out of the three companies I'm going to be talking about. Sure, the Gillig windows go all the way to the ceiling, and they're all on the same level, which I guess aesthetically looks better, although that actually I don't really care. But the thing is, the windows are just too small. They're too high. When you're sitting on the low floor portion of the bus, the bottom of the window is nearly eye level, and it makes it really hard to film out of. Here's a clip where I changed my mind. I was gonna ride the Line 75 and film it, and then I changed my mind. Take a look at this. In general, it does seem like Gillig is getting better at making these buses, and it seems like they're solid. They're still running like they're fairly new, except for maybe the 3000s and 3100s. But in general, it does seem like a good, simple construction, and the features are getting better and better. I like the fading lights and the newer back door designs and that sort of thing. But they're still not my favorite. Useless trivia. The 3500 series buses have the fading lights, and they use physical, lights with red covers for the mood lighting, emergency window lighting. Although I think I might do a whole separate video talking about why they're separate colored lights. But the 3500s were the first to introduce the fading lights. But then the 3600s on didn't have them, and then starting on the 4000s, they got color changing fading lights. So when the doors close, the interior lights turn red and some of them fade out. And I think that looks really nice. And the 4300s are the only ones in the fleet with the blue internal lights that TriMet was testing with those. And that looks really nice too. But I like how the from 4000s onward have the color changing lights. It's kind of a feature that goes underappreciated. It makes it much easier to see when there's a bar of white light across one side. And that's something I don't really see New Flyer or Nova Bus doing, so that's very interesting. Now, on to New Flyer. TriMet is no stranger to ordering New Flyer buses, doing so for pretty much the entire 2000s decade. The oldest series of buses that we have right now are New Flyer D40 LFRs from 2008-2009. These have lasted incredibly well over the years, and they still run like they're fairly new. These are in great shape despite their age. The New Flyers also seem a bit more substantial than the Gilligs. It's hard to explain in words unless you've been on both. It's hard to explain what I mean there, but the New Flyers just feel like a fuller construction. They seem like they're probably heavier, and I'm not sure of the specs, they might not be, but they just feel more substantial. And I also like the bigger windows. New Flyer has huge square windows on their buses, and it makes it nice and easy to look out of no matter what seat you sit in the bus. Again, the little things seem to make a difference. The speakers. Gillig's speakers are much lower quality, inside and out, than all of the New Flyers. Even though the 2900s are our oldest series of buses, because they're New Flyer, the announcements are much clearer, much easier to understand, and it's just kind of weird. Even our newest Gilligs, the 4300s, have not great speakers inside. Sure, they're loud, but there's no bass. It can sometimes be hard to understand, and can be really hard to understand operators because their microphone and speaker situation is just not all that great. Here's a strange comparison. I'm going to show you a clip from a 2021 Gillig bus for the announcements. Then I'm going to show you a 2005 bus from New Flyer, from the 2800 series buses. And I want you to pay attention to the audio announcement quality.
Southwest 18th, transfer to Max, lines 15, 24, 51, and 63. Southwest Canyon and Hall.
We got way off track there, so let's start talking about what I like about New Flyers again. Now this is 100% personal preference, but I like New Flyer's stop chime better than Gillig's. It's a little more nostalgic for me because, you know, these go back quite a ways, and New Flyer is still producing buses with this exact chime. My personal favorite buses that are on the market right now for the US and Canada are the New Flyer Excelsiors, and TriMet has 5 for battery electrics. These are my all-time favorite for looks, and because you can get diesel, hybrid, compressed natural gas, electric trolley bus, battery electric, and hydrogen, and probably others. It's insane. The New Flyer Excelsior Electrics have got to be the coolest sounding electric buses you will ever hear, and they are incredibly quiet. Listen to this awesomeness. New Flyer has always been pretty good about making cool sounding buses, and they probably did that on accident, but remember the 2800s? We never forget. Take a listen. So what are my complaints about New Flyer? Well, I would imagine, as a driver, it might be kind of distracting having so many interior lights on. It seems like New Flyer's always had a thing where most of the internal lights stay on after the doors close in the bus. And while I don't operate a bus myself, and I don't want to speak for anyone, I could imagine the Gilligs where they have a lot less internal lights on, and they're on the left side, behind the driver, behind their little panel. I would imagine there's a lot less glare on the Gilligs. Also, while the Excelsior air brakes have a very distinctive sound, they are very loud, and you don't really want to be standing anywhere near them. It kind of depends on the bus purchases, though, because the ones in Seattle do sound a little different from the ones in Portland, but also kind of not. It's weird. Now for the single most annoying thing. Some Excelsior buses do this. That sounds like a 3-year-old smacking on food. Who thought that was a good idea? And our buses do that. Of course they do. Now on to Nova Bus. Now, I have only more recently got into buses, so I gotta be honest with you, I never even heard of this company until I saw that TriMet was ordering from them. So FX2 opened on Division, and, well, I'm quite impressed. They look better and perform better than I would have thought. I'll talk about the big elephant in the room here in a second, but initial first impressions, I have nothing to really complain about. They have a sense of familiarness. They sort of sound like Gilligs. They do remind me of New Flyer, but not as good. But not bad either. So I have to talk about the recall situation because I feel like I should bring it up. From early November until January 28th, 2023, these buses were not running due to a recall. I talked about it in a recent video, but they re-entered service on Sunday, January 29th. And the issue was because of steering gear equipment. And this is actually the second such recall in the last year that had to deal with steering gear equipment. So either Nova Bus is just getting the worst luck possible, or there's something that they're routinely doing wrong. But they worked with TriMet for, I think, 8 weeks to develop a fix and installed it on all the Nova buses, and they are back in service. This has nothing to do with the quality of any of the companies, because if you look at the list of recalls for Gillig and New Flyer, they have a whole list of their own of recalls. We just got really unlucky because Nova Buses was discovered less than 2 months after the BRT line opened. It was really bad luck, really bad timing, and it would have happened regardless. Let's say we had the buses for 5 years, November 2022, the issue would have been discovered or whatever, and it would have happened. Or maybe it would have been open for 6 hours before the issue was discovered. That is past us now, and they're back in service, and so here's to, another 15 years of service. So now let's talk about the things that annoy me about these. We gotta talk about the kneeling. When a Gillig bus kneels, it has a very distinctive beep, 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 beep. It has that long beep at the beginning and just normal beeps. When a New Flyer beeps, it has a friggin' panic attack and goes beep, 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 beep. It's really weird, and New Flyer's done that forever. The Nova buses sound like a large truck or something backing up. You know how when a large truck backs up, it just goes meep, meep, meep? That is what the Nova buses do, and it's the same thing the Orion buses did, which Portland never had, but I've heard them before. And I have found this to be officially crowned as king of the most annoying kneeling beep ever, are the Nova buses. I actually like the interior setup and layout of the articulated Nova buses better than the articulated New Flyers. I like that in the center section it's just sets of sideways seats, and that's it. No backwards facing seats, which I've always found really dumb for a bus. And it just makes a little more sense. It gives you that much more room in the front part of the bus. Something I've heard before is that Nova buses' hybrids are better than their diesels. I would like to see if that's true myself, and I hope that TriMet continues with their contract with Nova Bus and purchases that order of up to 128 more articulated buses for the busy routes in TriMet. We have been needing that for decades, and maybe I could do a whole separate video ranting about how TriMet has a phobia of articulated buses. But a key detail in that contract is that with the order of the 128 additional units, they can change the fuel type from diesel to hybrid. Just do that. Change them to hybrid. We're not living in 2000 anymore. We haven't needed diesel buses for 2 decades. No more diesel. Those should be hybrid. And I would like to see them for myself because I read it in a YouTube comment and I think somewhere else that Nova Bus's hybrids perform better than their diesels. But of course, that's probably just people talking and whatever, but I'd like to see one for myself because I don't know of anywhere near me that already has them. Seattle has a bunch of New Flyers. Vancouver has some New Flyers and a lot of Gilligs. Nowhere else really has new Nova buses. Everybody's pretty much ordering from New Flyer. So I'd like to see how a Nova bus hybrid performs. One more thing I like is the air conditioning. While they seem to kind of have issues at some point, it's actually due to operator error. The operators have full climate control on the FX buses. Full climate control, temperature, fan speed, I'm pretty sure, everything. So this is the first ever bus in the TriMet fleet to have that capability, and I think that is a very handy feature. One last thing, just like the New Flyers, the windows are huge, and you can easily film out them even if you're sitting at the lower deck window like I did not long after FX opened. I actually think the windows might be slightly bigger than New Flyers. New Flyer seems to have the width, like really wide windows, but I think Nova buses might be slightly bigger overall, which is insane. So we must answer the age-old question. What is your favorite series of TriMet buses? Well, for me, it is the 3800s. Despite the smacky blinkers, I think these are awesome and amazing, and I always enjoy every single time I get on one of these. Definitely my favorite, and I'm excited to say that Seattle, Washington and Vancouver, Washington have 60-foot Excelsior buses, and I've been to both cities and been on their buses, and they are very nice. Well, I thank you for watching this very opinionated video, and I'd like to know what your favorite and least favorite buses are in the TriMet fleet. Thank you for watching, and coming up next is a city that I've mentioned before in this video. You'll have to see what that is, and I'll see you then.